Our mission, it's to basically educate individuals that's been trapped in poverty of how to come out, as well as to educate individuals that's never been in poverty of how not to become barrier burdeners.
You need the people like Caprice Jones who have a passion for bringing about positive change and so are willing to dedicate their lives to making that happen. And then when you have people who are seeking out assistance, they're going to be drawn to people like Caprice because they know that Caprice cares.
I am a single mother of 3. I used to be an active addict. My passion is helping others and preventing someone from making the same mistakes I did in life.
We've touched hundreds, if not thousands, of lives. We're working with people that look at the Fountain of Youth as not just a safe place, but a lifeline.
The meetings are just wonderful. They're just, a lot of them are heartfelt, personalized meetings where you can relate to the other person because you've been there. You know what they're struggling with, and you feel that instant connection to them. It changed me to want to be a better dad, a more responsible person, a better person in the community.
The Fountain of Youth gives us hope. The Fountain of Youth gives us that ambition, that inspiration, that motivation. And for some of us, without the Fountain of Youth, we wouldn't have it at all. It's helped me become a better person all the way around. Like, I'm thankful and grateful for the Fountain of Youth. Changed my life.
First met Gian. It was a year ago. And Gian, he sat with me when we was over on 1497 Central. And I looked him in the eyes and I said, Gian, I'm already knowing that everyone that comes to the Family Youth Program is not going to be ready to change their life. And definitely not their entire life. But what I'm doing is I'm giving everyone an opportunity to show me if they are the one to want to change their life, or the one to work on changing their life, or the one to walk in changing their entire life. And again, looked me in my eyes and he said, Priest, I am the one to walk in changing my life. Experienced again was the elements of what it takes to actually change your life. Gian was focused and committed. I was overjoyed by seeing him come to his appointments every week like clockwork on time. Gian was an exceptional Partners in Change member. Gian is an exceptional person. I've met people through Gian that have told me that Gian began to pour into their life encouragement, inspiration, motivation, and love beyond limits. And what that did was it allowed me to be able to see that the work that we're doing at the Fountain Youth Program is not in vain. And Gian is a part of that change.
Well, I'm actually from the Dubuque. Because I find that it's the perfect segue from the athletic world into other opportunities that I can utilize those skills and those passions.
Perfect. Thank you. So before all of this, how was your childhood growing up?
Well, like I said, I was the oldest of three daughters. We're all 4 years apart. And, I would say my upbringing was, I was surrounded by family. Growing up in Epworth in a small town, we had my mom's side of the family, specifically, all of them lived there. So I grew up around a lot of cousins, and Epworth is a small community, still is, where everybody knows everybody, and it was great because it was one of those, you'd leave in the morning, go out and play, and you didn't come home until the streetlights came on. So it was just a wholesome kind of upbringing that got to hang out with friends all the time. And again, when you go to school with people from kindergarten all the way through high school. So I met as I was growing up, from my hometown. So it's a great community, small community, great place to raise a family.
Wow. So was your childhood basically a typical childhood, or was it difficult, like navigating to your thoughts of like what you wanted your future to look like?
It's interesting because I grew up in a 2-parent home. And I had, like I said, I was the oldest. And as I look back, during the time when I was growing up, I just thought, I had the same kind of upbringing and childhood that everybody else did. And then, as you get older and you look back and you start examining life and the choices that you make and why you do the things you do and think the way you think, all of that is formed in our younger years, right? And so I had to learn, at a pretty young age to handle some adversity. I had my father, when I grew up, had a drinking issue. And, again, it wasn't something at the time that I thought was a drinking issue, but when you looking back on it, and as an adult, we had conversation about it. And so it was hard. And as being the oldest of 3 kids, I just had to really learn from a young age. I think that's where I developed my independence and had to kind of figure out how to navigate. And I knew at probably middle school age, when I had my basketball coaches from middle school were really integral in my life, in shaping and getting me to realize like there's a whole other world out here that I can experience. And I happened to be good at sports. It helped that in 8th grade or 6th grade, I was 5'8". I was a foot taller than everybody else around me.
Hold on. So I had to do the math real quick. So you was taller than me in 6th grade.
Yeah. Well, I didn't want to say it, Caprice, but yeah.
I'm 5'6.5", but to most doctors, I'm 5'7".
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I passed you up in about 4th grade. Okay. So it was the first time that I had this talent. I have this skill, and what can I do with it? And so I had a 7th grade basketball coach. She was also my gym teacher, named Gay Wilker. She used to live in Dubuque. She was a coach at Western Dubuque. She's not in the area anymore, but she really took me under her wing and just kind of talked to me about goals and where I wanted to be when I grew up and what I wanted to do and what was possible for me. And that's the first time we talked really about playing college basketball. And so that's where the interest sparked in me. And it was really from that point on, I just was like, I was focused. I was locked in that that's what I was going to do because I wanted to go to college. I was the first in my family to go to college. And I knew that in order to do that, I'd have to figure out a way to pay for it. So an athletic scholarship for me was the goal. And so through her guidance and then, the other coaches that I had the opportunity to have in junior high and then again as I moved on into high school, where my high school coach, varsity coach was Bill Hafer, and he's no longer at Western Dubuque, but that guy changed my life. To this day, he's my go-to. Everybody needs a go-to person to bounce things off, or if you need somebody to give you a pep talk or just want to kind of work through things. He's my guy. So I was really fortunate that I had amazing coaches in those formative middle school and high school years.
Interesting. So when you was a kid, did you have a thought of being where you're at right now?
No. No. That's a great question. I mean, I do. In addition to my coaching and consulting work that I do, I'm in sports broadcasting. So I do college women's basketball, mainly for the Big Ten Network. And never in my wildest dreams did I ever even consider wanting to be a sports broadcaster. A lot of it was because there weren't many women in that arena. There were some, Phyllis George, who recently passed away, was one who was in the football world. But, actually, when I first went to college, I got into, psychology. That's my background. That's my degree. And I always knew I loved that. So that part of it is consistent. I have always been really into what motivates people, really into, trying to find out and encourage and overcome obstacles and that kind of stuff because of the coaches that I had, because that's what they did for me. And so that part of me I wanted to find a way to pass that along to other people. So really for me, it started with staying involved in coaching. And that was kind of my first thing I did out of college. Once I finished college, I got into coaching.
Interesting. So let me ask you, how was your actual college experience when you did go to college? Walk us through it.
It was colorful. It was colorful. I started my college years at Drake University in Des Moines. Earned a full ride scholarship to play basketball there. And I always tell people it's interesting. I consider myself to be one of the first generation NCAA women's basketball players because the very first NCAA championship game was held in 1982. Well, I entered college in 1987. So we were still really in the early phases or early stages of the women's game at the NCAA level. Now, it had existed prior to that in different organizations, but not as an NCAA sport. And so, there was a lot of college coaches, I believe, that were kind of trying to figure it out on their own. And, really the only mentors that you had to look up to, because again, the sport itself didn't really, catch on until, maybe 10 years before me at the college level. But so there weren't a lot of female mentors for female coaches. And so a lot of it was, what are the men doing? And let's just replicate what the men are doing. And so my freshman year started off difficult for me because I had an injury. And so that injury back then, when you were injured, you didn't go to practice. You weren't on the court necessarily or in the gym with, riding the bike or doing your rehab. You were pretty much isolated from the team because while they were practicing, I was in the training room doing my rehab stuff. So it was really hard. And I just felt disconnected and isolated. And, having an injury as a freshman, you're already trying to figure out which end is up. and then it just really set me and put me behind in terms of my ability to, participate in practice and learn. And so, but I eventually did come back and I started playing, I think I want to say it was like December. So, I actually I ended up averaging like, I think, around 12, 15 minutes a game as a freshman, which is pretty good and at that level. But it was tough. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was really hard. I was in an environment that was not conducive to, really thriving. It was very tough from the standpoint of mentally, like not, it didn't necessarily, I was used to coming from a high school and a junior high coach that were very tough and very driven, but they did it from a positive standpoint, a positive perspective. And so it was more about encouraging. And this was more about, if you make a mistake, you're going to get it. And so it was really punitive would be the word that I would use. And so, that didn't work for me. It wasn't good. And there were things that happened my freshman year that should never happen to anybody. Some of it happened to me. Some of it happened to my teammates. And so as a result of that, by the end of that first year as a freshman, I'd checked out mentally. I'd had it. And I decided that I needed to get out of that environment and try something else. And so I transferred. And so that was my first transfer. And then I went, transferred to the University of Nebraska because that was a school that had recruited me while I was in high school as well. And, I always tell people I kind of felt like I went from the frying pan into the fire in that instance. And so, again, this is all around the kind of environment and the kind of culture that is best for individuals to thrive in, and especially for athletes. You have to be able to be in an environment where it's okay to, take risks. It's okay to make a mistake and to learn from that mistake and to grow. But again, I look back at it, Caprice, and I think, I wonder how much of a contribution, like I said, that female coaches at the time were just really trying to figure it out on their own. And watching other coaches, watching the Bobby Knights of the world. And that was a different time. It was a different style of coaching. And it was just, again, very, very punitive, very rigid. And it was difficult to, really trust and get out there and just put it all out on the line. Because, you were so afraid. You were just so afraid to screw up and of what the ramifications were going to be from that. And, I, again, had, issues some stuff that happened to me personally, some things that happened to my teammates. I can give you an example. One of my so back then, none of this stuff is legal right now, thank God. But, there was a time when we used to have to get weighed in before and after practice. You'd go to practice, you'd weigh yourself, everybody would get weighed, and then you would go to practice, and then after practice, we got weighed again. Well, the whole point, the intent of that was to see how much weight we lost to determine how hard you worked. And, if you didn't meet a certain weight after that, or if you didn't meet weekly check-ins for your weight, you were reprimanded, you were punished, you were brought in and had to, run extra and that kind of stuff. And so, unfortunately, I had a teammate who, developed an eating disorder from that. And there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. Second time. And I finished my career at the University of Northern Iowa. So my feather in my cap is that I say, I transferred, I went to 3 different universities and I still managed to graduate in 4 years. So I made it difficult, not going to lie. Those last 2 years were really hard. I was taking like 18 and 19 hours a semester just to get through it. But that's ultimately where I actually started my college or my coaching career at one of the local high schools. And that's when things, really turned around, because I was able to take the things that I learned, what I liked, what worked and what didn't work, what I saw from coaching styles that worked and coaching styles that were detrimental to someone. And so that was my first experience in the coaching world, and it went pretty well. I coached at Cedar Falls High School. I was an assistant coach there, and the last year that I was there in 1991, we won the Iowa State Championship. Went 26-1 on the season, and just had a great group of girls. And so for me, that was very important because it allowed me to finish my college career, if you will, on a positive note. Because, quite frankly, up until that point, it was a struggle. It was really hard. It's not what I thought it was going to be when I went into it.
So, thanks for sharing that. So I never looked at it that way, but some things could be so like even in that type of atmosphere, do you believe that caused for a lot of people probably in your era, and it's probably still going on today in different ways, a lot of childhood trauma?
Oh yeah, so trauma is a thing that I am kind of geeky about, and I know that sounds weird. But to me, first of all, the word trauma freaks people out, right? So for most people, they automatically assume or equate trauma with PTSD, military PTSD, or trauma from sexual assault, trauma from domestic assault, that kind of stuff. And those are the obvious ways to suffer from trauma. But there are other, hundreds of other ways that we can experience trauma in our life. And so I also try to use the word adversity, extreme adversity, because I think that people resonate with that more. And so, when you're talking about anything, really, there are some scientists that say anything that's non-nurturing can result in trauma. So, if that's the case, we live in a world filled with trauma.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, it's looking back at that. Yeah, absolutely. That was traumatic. Those were traumatic times for me, for a lot of my teammates. But the interesting thing about that is, you can take a person, you can take two people, put them in the exact same environment, and they're seemingly experiencing the same thing, right? But they can interpret it and experience it mentally, emotionally, and psychologically different. So why is that? Well, one of the big reasons that happens is, and again, that's all things equal. Their experience, they're receiving the same treatment, they're receiving the same behaviors, the same communication, the same things are being said to them or about them. And one person, they can just be like, whatever, and just move on. And the other one is just absolutely shattered by it. So to me, that I always found that so fascinating because, why is it that people react differently? It's why we hear conflicting stories all the time, when an issue comes up. And I do a lot of this in the athletic world. And so, but you have to back it up and you have to look at people's history. And so our history is what forms our default way of thinking and our default behaviors and the ways that we act. I like to refer to it as we all see the world through a different lens, a different colored lens. And so, if we're in the same environment, I might be looking through glasses that everything looks blue. You may be looking through glasses that everything looks green. And you're describing stuff to me that I'm like, what are you talking about? It's blue, and you're over here going, no, it's green. And so until we can understand how other people are viewing the world and what maybe has led them to see things the way that they see them, we really struggle. And I think it's why we're in such a divisive society where we are now, because everybody just wants to dig their heels in and fight for their own way of thinking. And this is what I believe, and this is how I was raised, and this is, how I learned. And so therefore, this is the way it is. Everybody sees things this way. And it's not necessarily the case. So I saw this a couple weeks ago. I actually posted this on my social media. This was eye-opening to me. So, I'm going to write this. I'm going to show you this. So, when you draw like a star, can we see this? Okay. So I'm going to take my marker and I'm drawing this star, right? So we've all seen this kind of star. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to, okay. So now I just put numbers on that star. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So someone posted this on social media and I was like, wait, what? They said, how do you draw that star? Using the numbers, write out how you draw that star. Well, I draw that star 1, 2, 4, 5, 3, back to 1. Doesn't everybody? It blew my mind that like the majority of people that were responding to that are like 2, 1, 3, 5, 4. And I'm like, what? Who would do that? Like, it doesn't, like I can't even do it. I can't even write that star that way. And it dawned on me, I was like, I'm, in my 50s and I have made this star the same way my entire life and just assumed that that's how everybody else did it too.
And then hold on for a second. Let me ask you a question. So this on a whole nother level of it, right? Of seeing like how everybody see, like how we assume everybody see things the same way, right? Which is nowhere near true because some people have been exposed to different things. Mm-hmm. And I think in our minds, we interpret things from what we experience or what we've been exposed to, we've been taught. Yep. These things being planted in our brains. And so when I seen that star, I'll be honest with you, the first thing that came to my mind. So when you first see a star, mm-hmm. What are the first things come to your mind about a star?
Me?
Yeah.
I see the Star of Bethlehem. I think of that.
That's what comes to your mind.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna tell you what comes to my mind because I come from a Chicago environment, right? Uh-huh. In the hood, the first thing come to my mind is that star was a representation of a gang. That was a gang related star. That's the first thing come to my mind. That don't mean that that's the truth for everything about that star, but that's the first thing because my mind has been traumatized to see things that way. Yeah. So to me, it's like processing things on a whole different level. Now to you, it's just a regular star, but to me, it was like a deep meaning behind a star.
Right. And that's a perfect example of attaching meaning to things based on your history, right? It's what I just said. We both just looked at the same star. And for me, I'm thinking Jesus, the birth of Jesus, and you're thinking a gang sign. But the other thing to learn from that is, regardless of how you draw that star, whatever pattern you use, you get to the same damn star. So there's different ways to get to the same ending. There's different ways to come together and create a joint project, or different ways to bring multiple people on a team and accept and invite their differences to get to the same outcome that we all want.
Wow. And also, I think, Shelley, that it because it's different ways to learn. Right. So it's like when you meet different people, you have different opportunities to learn and be exposed to something new. Because say for instance, I know was exposed to that star being a representation of anything spiritual. You'll be the first person that ever exposed me to that, to be able to look at it from a different perspective.
Right.
From a healthier perspective, from a more positive perspective. Mm-hmm. So say for instance, when you said about the trauma that happens inside of schools from other human beings teaching things, because the people that teach those things, more than likely, they was taught it. So they thought it was just the way to do things. They actually thought it was actually helping, right? But it was hurting. Right. They didn't think what they was doing was wrong. So, and like you said, it's against the law now. So at the time, it was never considered wrong. So they just did it until somebody said, no, that can't happen no more.
Right.
And so do you think that, okay, let me ask you a question. Was you always a good player in basketball?
Was I always good?
Yeah. So was you ever benched?
Oh, heck yeah. More times than I can remember.
Hold on. Now the thing is, was that a good feeling, a good emotional feeling to get benched?
No. And if anybody tells you that they enjoy getting benched, they're lying. Nobody does, because, we don't want to. It's really hard to be told that you're screwing up. Nobody likes to hear that in anything, whether it's sports, at your work, in a relationship, even parent to child. It's not something that's fun. We don't enjoy our flaws being pointed out, right? And so, and plus, if you're a competitive person, if I'm speaking, athletically, if you're a competitive person, you're out there trying to, be the best. You're trying to give the best performance and do everything that you can to be the best. And now where this got me into trouble was, and I learned this the hard way, because I personally, you could reprimand me all you want as a coach, but it wasn't even close to criticizing the amount of that I would do it to myself. I was my worst critic. I was I was harder on me than anybody. Mm-hmm. And because, I was always taught that if you control your destiny, right? I was always taught that you control your own destiny. So everything you do is up to you. Nobody's going to do it for you. Nobody's going to hand you anything. And if you want to be the best, if you want to go to college, if you want a scholarship, if you want to win, me. So I took that literally. And so when I screwed up, when I made a mistake, I also was the one to beat myself up the most. And so I missed the opportunity. That's a very fixed mindset way to think, because I just thought I had to be perfect. And so I missed the opportunity of the growth mindset. I missed the opportunity of looking at what did I do and what led to this mistake and how can I learn from it? What can I do different next time? And that's why, that's why my coach in high school was awesome at this, because, he would, let's say it's the day after a game, he would bring me in to watch the game film. We had the VCR game films back then. And we'd go back through, all the plays, and he'd point out what I did really well so that I could see it. I could visualize when I was successful, because that's even more important than looking at the times where I messed up. And so, but we would look at those, and then he would say, okay, this is what you did. What were you thinking here? What were you seeing on the court? And what could you do differently? So that is a growth mindset. That is a leader instilling growth mindset. And we can get into this later, but it's what I talk about all the time. It's creating a psychologically safe environment, right? It's allowing a person to make a mistake without reprimanding or retribution or retaliation. And that is what fosters growth in individuals. And then I went to college and I didn't have that anymore. It was just reprimand. And, so here I am already being tough on myself as that's just what I learned. And then I've got leaders or coaches who are also, with that fixed mindset. And so it wasn't good. So, I had to learn to toughen it up, to toughen up. And that's all you can do. And so when we get in those positions of, where we're in an environment that if you're beating yourself up and you're being really hard on yourself, it's important to surround yourself with other people who can help you see things differently, who can help find the goodness, who can point out what you're doing well, right? And if you're in an environment where everyone in that environment is also pointing out your mistakes and is also, bringing you down and making you feel, or not helping lift you back up, then that's a spiral. It's like if I'm on the stage and you're down below me, or I'm on a ladder and you're down below me, is it easier for me to pull you up the ladder, or is it easier for you to pull me off the ladder?
Well, it's easy to pull you off.
Exactly. And so if we don't have people that are surrounding us and lifting us up and helping us up that ladder, and we're not intentional about that, it's way too easy because we're wired. Default, we are wired with a negative bias. It's a survival mechanism of human beings. And so if we're not intentional about checking our own thoughts, about having a growth mindset and surrounding ourselves with people who are going to lift us up, especially when we get in those times where we're just beating ourselves up, that's not good. It's really hard to be your best self in that setting.
So I'm quite sure it's a lot of athletes and just humans, period, that beat themselves up and be self-critical. And so if you could encourage somebody that may be watching, that may struggle from being self-critical, what type of advice would you give them if they coming either out of teenage years or coming into adulthood or in adulthood? They may be older. They may be in their 50s.
Right.
Because, like maturity, it's you can mature outwardly, but internally, you may not mature. So in order to be able to get past the pain of the mistakes, what would you say to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, first of all, don't beat yourself up over it, really. I think that there's, to find the good in that, people that are hard on themselves or demanding of themselves can be a good thing if it's spun the right way. Because people that are wired that way, deep down want to be better. They are driven by success. They're driven by progress. They're driven by performance. And so that's a wonderful, they're the kind of people that don't settle. They're the kind of people that, want to transform things. They're maximizers. They want to take things from good to better. And so that would be my first thing, is to look at it instead of, looking at it as a negative. Look at the good that comes out of that. And then you got to learn how to recognize when you're having those feelings of self-deprecation. And so it's a think this, not that. And so there's a way, there's an actual thing that I do with people. It's called a neural conditioning chart. And so you take, I'm sure people have heard of that book, Eat This, Not That. So this is think this, not that. And so when you have a limiting belief or a self-sabotaging statement, or, man, I'm such an idiot, or God, I suck at this, or fill in the blank, or even if someone else is saying it to you and you've heard this messaging over and over and over again, you write that down and you write down what you actually want to feel like and say. And so you write down column A is the bad thing that's being said. Column B is how do I feel when this happens? Column C is what's something that I can do to be aware and kind of snap myself out of that negative thought loop into a positive thought loop, and then say this. So, for instance, if this loop is going through my head as a basketball player, because I missed this actually happened to me. I was a sophomore in high school, and our team was the first time we had ever made it to the state tournament. I'm a sophomore on the varsity starter, and I'm at the free throw line towards the end of the game, not the very end, but close enough to the end that it made a huge impact in my mind. Free throw lines. I was awful at free throws then. I go to the free throw line, have an opportunity to tie the game, and I miss. And we end up losing the game like 3 minutes later. And I am devastated. And for the longest time, I just beat myself up for that. And I was like, man, in my mind, you suck. I am the worst free throw shooter there is. And it didn't help when I went to the local grocery store and I overheard the people who, are fans saying, oh yeah, she blew it at the state tournament. So, those kinds of thoughts kept looping through my head. And they made me feel like crap. And then it's that negative thought loop going in my head. So I started, my whole body, my whole being started believing that I sucked at free throws. So I knew I wanted to change that, right? So I had to go from I suck at free throws to I'm a great free throw shooter. But there's a huge disconnect in my brain from point A to Z. So what you do in that situation is you come up with a mantra and a physical cue to try to snap yourself out of that. So when you start catching yourself in any kind of negative thought, and we talk to ourselves all the time, all day long, whether we realize it or not, in our brains. So when you catch yourself doing that negatively, having some kind of a physical cue, it can be a snap of the finger, it can be tap yourself on the arm, on the shoulder, and then say to yourself, I am a good free throw shooter. Or say to yourself, I am capable of performing this task. Or say to yourself, I am worthy of love. Whatever it is. I'll give you another example. My son-in-law is on the San Francisco 49ers. He plays football, pro football. So you want to talk about a guy that's overcome adversity. He probably weighed $180 soaking wet when he was a freshman in college. And now he's arguably the best tight end in the NFL. His name is George Kittle. He's went to the Super Bowl last year. He's an all-pro tight end. He's entering his 4th season. He has on his forearm a tattoo of the Joker. And you can look this up. You can Google it and read all about it. But basically what that is that's his mental reset button. So when he's out on the field and he makes a play or misses a play and he's like, ugh, in that zone of being upset, you don't have time to dwell on the past when you're in anything, but especially a professional athlete. So for him to get to that next play, he'll slap that tattoo because that's like his alter ego, right? That's his game face. And so he hits that tattoo and it brings him right back into focusing on the next play. And so that's what a mantra and a physical cue can do to help us rewire and retrain our brains to become and think the way that we want to think so that we can perform at our best.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna make you feel better. So you didn't know I played basketball as a kid, right? All the way to 9th grade, and I just knew I was a good player. I just knew I was, like the language that I grew up, that we're familiar with in Chicago is like, I just knew I was cold-blooded. I was raw. I was a star in my own mind, right? So I got an opportunity to play for this particular to go try out for this particular league. It's called Small Fry. Yep. And that's like a real big thing in Chicago when I was growing up in the 80s, right? To be a part of Small Fry. And so they took me out there. This is supposed to be the best of the best from all the neighborhoods, the bad neighborhoods, but the best basketball players, right? So it's like a little junior all-star league, right? And so I get out there. I'm waiting for them to put me in because I'm cold-blooded. And I was like, man, I'm going to impress them when I take my shot or when I go out there because I knew how to dribble real well. I was a point guard. So I could dribble when nobody be able to rip me or nothing, but I wanted to really impress them by hitting a shot. And, I don't know if you're familiar with this term in Iowa, but in Chicago, the term is like a bad shot is like you throwing up bricks.
Yeah.
The same thing.
Oh, yeah.
So if you throw a brick, that's like embarrassing, right? So I'm dribbling. I get out there. And they like, oh, here come little young guy they done brought from the south side. And so I get out there. Only thing on my mind is impressing the coach so I can get a starting position one day, right? And I threw a brick so far. I shot the ball at half court. I didn't even try to advance. I just shot it. And it hit the top of the backboard. Boom. The whole audience said, oh, why y'all even put him out there? So that was very heartbreaking for me, but it was also a learning experience for me in a lot of different ways, right? I learned that, maybe it wasn't meant for me to be a basketball star because I didn't have a mindset for it because I was focused on the wrong things. And it showed when I went to 9th grade that I wasn't thinking about sports to be my ultimate way out of life or, way out of the hood or something. So, maybe, do you think that a person can get to a certain point beyond sports where they begin to start really tapping into their real potential if it wasn't meant for them to be a star as a basketball player or something?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, again, for me, I talk about sports all the time because that's my background, right? That's where I learned all of those lessons. But there are, on a basketball team, typically there are 12 to 15 people on that team. Only 5 can be on the court at a time. And unfortunately, we live in a society that glorifies those 5 people on that court and kind of forgets about the rest of them, the other 7 to 10. And I know as a coach that if I only had 5 people, we wouldn't be very good. You need the entire team. And so that comes down to roles, and that comes down to accepting a role and knowing your role. But again, I'll go back to, how do you make sure that people feel like they're valued? And that's the job of a leader. And that comes with creating that culture and that environment where people feel like they can thrive. And if you're not doing that, you will notice it, because people will quit. People will transfer. People will shut down. They're going to be less than what they could be in their full potential if they were in an environment where they felt like they belonged. And, we hear a lot about the words diversity and inclusion, right? That's a big thing in corporate America. It's across the board everywhere. But there's 2 other letters that go along with that, and that's belonging and safety. So it's not enough to just be diverse and inclusive. You have to create an environment where people can feel like they belong, where they're valued no matter what their role is, and then where they feel safe. And I don't mean just physically safe, although in today's world, that's huge right now, but psychologically safe. It's an actual thing. And so when you can, as a leader, when you can create an environment like that, it's like the most fertile soil to grow a garden in, and there are no weeds, and you're going to get the greatest fruits and vegetables and the healthiest outcome of that garden possible. But if you don't, if there's toxins in that soil, if you're not tending to it, if you're only paying attention to the tomatoes and not the peppers, it's going to be less than, and eventually those peppers are going to just die or, say, I'm out of here. So I think that it's really important to make sure that not only as a leader, but even if you're that person, like let's say you're that athlete that's on that team that's not getting the playing time that he or she wants. And if that's all you're focused on, if you think that success for you or your worth and your value is in your playing time, you are going to be so disappointed for the rest of your life. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn. It took me a really long time and to go through that adversity that I did in college, because I was a state champion, all-state, all-American basketball player going into college. I thought I had the world by the tail, and my college experience was awful in the scheme of things from a basketball playing performance perspective, right? I didn't have a good experience, and I didn't know how to handle that, because I was always known as the basketball player. That was my identity, right? Until I learned and fortunately for me, found the Lord and understood and started reading the Bible and realized that my identity isn't in who I am or what I do or what I play or who I hang out with or my grades or, how many points I score. I am a daughter of Christ, and I am worthy, and I have a purpose, and I know went through all of those things that I went through to learn from them so that I can help the people behind me, so that I can help other leaders, whether it's in athletics or in the boardroom or in the classroom, so that I can help them learn and see the impact, first of all, the impact that coaches and leaders and coaches, teachers, leaders have on younger people's lives. It's huge. It absolutely shapes who we become as adults. And I don't know that there's enough emphasis or understanding the impact that people have on the kind of woman that I am today, the kind of man that you are today. I'm sure you have a mentor story or two people that helped you become and get to where you are today. And that's how God made us. He didn't make us to function in isolation. And that's why living in this pandemic is really hard for a lot of people right now, because we are isolated and we are made for connection. And the only way that we can become resilient human beings and get through those traumas and those adversities is in safe connection with other people.
Wow. And that's a lot of things that you're saying right now it's helping me. It's how I learn. I learn from different people with good advice. It's helping me be able to shape a lot of things just in all type of areas of my life, as far as like just to be able to examine myself, to make sure that I'm being a good leader, if that's the type of role that I'm in, with people depending on me to make the right decisions. And I think it all boils down to like a team effort. When I threw that brick, I wasn't thinking about the team. I was only thinking about me. And I wasn't allowed to hit that shot, because I'm glad I wasn't, because if I would have and I'd have got the popularity, the praise that I was looking for in that moment, that probably would have took my life to some different places. But it led me here to still be having to learn. And I thank you for sharing your experience with life in those areas, and also your growth mindset as well as your wisdom. So we got 10 minutes left. I want to tap into a couple of more things before we leave. So what was your thoughts when you got your first major job?
So my first, as I call it, real job was actually, it's not even anything close to what I'm doing now. I was a pharmaceutical sales rep, and I thought I had the world by the tail, because this was like there was a lot of people competing for this kind of job. It was secure. It paid really well. I had a car. I had a bag phone. Yes, bag phone, I said. That's when they first came out. And I had everything that I thought you needed to have to be successful. The money, the status, I was able to travel. And don't get me wrong, it was a great, secure job, but it was completely the opposite of who I was inside. It didn't allow me to do the things that I really wanted to do, and the gifts, and it didn't allow me to use the experiences that I had to contribute positively to society. For me, it was financially rewarding, but it was not fulfilling.
Wow. So I guess that takes me into our next question, which may be the last question, but we still got 7 minutes, so you can take your time answering it. Because it's kind of like a loaded question. So when you said that in the beginning, you was looking for to think that it was like that was going to be that was the big one, right? So it's going to be fulfilling. But when you actually got it, it wasn't all what it was cracked up to be. But it was good. But it wasn't everything. So my question to you is, if you could describe personal happiness, what would it look like for you? Have you ever experienced personal, deep, satisfying happiness?
Absolutely. And I think that the definition of that for people probably changes throughout their lifetime. I think, again, when you're younger, I think you think happiness, at least a lot of people I know think happiness is found in things, in the ability to buy stuff, or in status and titles, or even sometimes in relationships. And true happiness to me is what's in here. It's being able to sit with yourself in complete silence, perhaps, and like the person that you are. It's being able to look in the mirror and love the person that you see staring back at you. To me, it's more about joy. And you've heard happiness is based on happenings, but joy is more of that internal, for me, sense of calm and sense of peace. And just knowing that even if stuff outside isn't happening the way I want it to, I can still feel content and at home in my heart, in my soul. And that to me is authentic happiness. That's really what I think the world is striving for, because, you know, you can read story after story after story of people who have made millions and billions of dollars, and they say, you know, on their deathbed that they're not happy, or that they wish they would have spent more time with X, Y, and Z. And so for me, my children are and spending time with them and being able to, you know, enjoy their activities and lift them up and encourage them the way I had people encourage me and create opportunities. That brings me joy, seeing the smiles on their faces and the laughter and seeing them thrive. And as I mentioned, they both went on and played college basketball. And so, you know, helping them along the way from the lessons that I've learned so that they could create a better path for themselves and have a better outcome than I did, that brings me joy.
Wow. So basically, I guess we could debunk the myth today that money, all the money in the world, is not gonna be a fulfillment of your life, right?
Yeah. If you have to, if getting all the money in the world, or, you know, all the money costs you your relationships or costs you your health, is that really worth it? I mean, in the end, you're not going to take it with you when you go, you know? And so, yeah, it's great. And it makes life easier. I'm not going to lie about that. It certainly makes life easier to do different things. But if it's one or the other, which it doesn't have to be, but I'm just saying, if you're doing it at the expense of joy and love and connection with other people, it's not happiness. That's not happiness. That's not who we were created to be.
Wow. That was nicely put. I mean, that was an eye opener. I mean, it's just the truth, you know? Just think about it. Michael Jackson had a lot of money. And Michael Jackson, he paid money to live forever. Well, now I think he wanted to live for like 100 or 200 years old. But Michael Jackson only lived to 51. And he didn't take none of the money with him. And he had a lot of money, but it don't mean nothing now, do it. The only thing that matters is how he treated people when he was on this earth. How he helped people.
Mm-hmm. You know, you asked me a question earlier, and this will kind of tie it up. It's when you're feeling like in a funk, or when you're being hard on yourself, or, you know, you feel those negative voices coming up, or that I'm never going to make it. I'm never going to fill in the blank. What we're lacking, what we feel like we're missing in our lives, when you go and give that and do that for someone else, it immediately flips the switch. And I'm just going to really quickly, when George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis, when that happened and it was all over our TVs, right? I had this incredible, just overwhelm of sorrow. I was, again, because that's an abuse of power, right? And I have a whole history of abuse of power. And so for me, it was personal from that standpoint of the raw emotion and it just was wrong. And I'm like, what can I do about this? You know, what can I do here in Dubuque, Iowa? And so I used my platform of training coaches and created a forum where we talked about diversity, inclusion, belonging, and safety, and creating that environment so that coaches knew how to interact with their athletes, so that coaches could listen to their athletes, to give the athletes a platform to say, this is how this affects me. And finally, we've made that conversation normal. We've given the floor to have that conversation, so that for some of these people, for some of these athletes that come to university settings, an arena, and this is regardless of your skin color. The arena, the field might just be the only safe place that person has ever known. Think about that. Depending on our background and where we come from and our experiences, the workplace, the school might be the only safe place that person ever knows. And this is not just limited to athletes and students. This is people that work for you. This is teachers. This is coaches. This is managers, employees. If that space may be the only, or at least one of the best places that they know that they can thrive and be themselves, and we don't create that environment for them, all that's happening is you're just re-traumatizing that person every time they step in. You're re-traumatizing that person every time they go on that court or on that field or into that classroom, which is a whole other story, because that's some of the fear that we're seeing right now amongst educators and their fear of going back to school in the classroom when in the middle of this pandemic. So it is so important to use what you have to try to make something better for the people around you. And that is what I try to do. And that is why, I created the DIBS assessment, the diversity, inclusion, belonging, and safety assessment, so that people can actually get a feel for their team and their employees and how people are feeling, so that you can know. It's like taking the stats after a game. You don't know how well you did or where you need to work on if you don't see the stats after the game, right? These are taking the stats of the work or the work environment, the school environment, the team environment that you have. And it's so important. And if we could just do that one little thing, Caprice, if we could just create an arena, an environment, a culture where people feel like they belong and they're safe to be who they are, we wouldn't have half the problems that we have in the world because we'd have people functioning at the highest level that they know how to function at.
Let me ask you. So how could someone get access to the DIBS?
The easiest way is to reach out to me on email, and we can post this underneath too, but it's Shelley Till, SHELLEYTILL at me.com, and just say, hey, I want to see the DIBS survey. I want to take the DIBS survey, and I'll just send you a link, and you just do it all online.
Perfect. Thank you, Shelley. I mean, this has been an amazing conversation. It was way more impactful than I imagined from the start. It gave me a lot to process, a lot to think about, and a lot to work on. Certain areas that needs to work on. As an individual, as a human. And I usually don't do this, but I think I may have to have you back on one day. But I'm gonna have you surrounded by some of my participants.
Awesome.
We can have a conversation with my participants and you, because I think your purpose on this earth is greater than any circumstance you ever faced or situation you ever had to endure. And I believe that it's time for you to pour it into any and everybody that's willing to be open to receive.
Well, thank you, Caprice. I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to be with you here tonight. And anytime, I'm happy to come back. And if anyone has any questions or any follow-up after this, please feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you, Shelley. I appreciate you. And I'll be talking to you soon.
All right. You take care.
You too.